Let's get her on the gurney. Come on.
Oh, perfect.
You heard that.
It sounded like that Aide just WWE smacked down her onto that gurney. If she wasn't unresponsive before, she sure is now. This is 2019's Home is Where the Killer Is. Spoiler alert, while I might be giving you my opinion on the film, that's no substitute for watching it for yourself. Links to the film are in the description. As the doctor wheels Alice back to the back, her landlord, Julie, watches on as she becomes even more unresponsive. Soon she begins to crash, and after multiple attempts at bringing her back, they call it. Julie lets out a horrifying cry, and we flash ahead to her looking at a picture in her room. The picture is of her and Alice, and when she goes into the spare room, we see a hospital bed set up. Julie cleans up all traces from the room, and we see the title screen. Next, we meet Nicole, who is in the hospital one minute and at the bar the next. While she enjoys a drink alone, Lauren comes up and joins her to drink with her. After the friend hints to a terrible past of Nicole's, they toast to new beginnings. The next day, Nicole calls a number she gets from an online posting for a room for rent. When she goes to meet with the landlord, we see that it is none other than Julie. This is one of the most painful interactions I've seen in a movie. Apparently, Julie talks to Nicole about the room on the phone and even gives her the address. But when Julie answers the door, she says the room isn't for rent. She says that she just didn't want to disappoint Nicole by telling her it wasn't available anymore. I'm sorry, this woman just drove halfway across town for one purpose only, and you're just gonna tell her psych when she gets there? Nicole goes to leave, but she starts to feel a little lightheaded. Julie goes to get her a glass of water, and Julie pieces together that she's going for radiation. After finding this out, Julie decides to change her mind again. She takes Nicole in to show her the room, and afterwards they sit out back to drink tea and go over the agreement. Nicole talks about how she's getting a settlement check for her doctor missing the cancer, and Julie tells her that she's a retired doctor. After going over their personal issues, Julie explains that she just thinks the world needs more people to help one another. After that, Nicole moves her stuff in and they are officially roommates. Welcome to the neighborhood. No, keep the first and last and let me leave. That would have been the end of it. Who moves into a new roommate situation and doesn't lock their door on the first night? The next morning, it's almost like none of that even happened. Nicole comes downstairs just in time to catch Julie sending out a patient that was there for an appointment. Once Julie notices her, she brings Nicole outside to show her where the spare key is, and we meet Nicole's ex, Kyle. Kyle drops off some of Nicole's things, and just like that, he's gone. The next day, Nicole tries to get her car started to go to her appointment, but when the car won't start, Julie pops up out of nowhere and offers to take her. Once there, Nicole's doctor shows up to ask her some questions. Nicole tries to get some answers from her doctor, but once he kind of blows her off, Julie steps in and gives him a speech about how he should treat her like a person instead of data. Once they get home, Julie pries a little further into Nicole's personal life. She tries to ask why Kyle can't stand to be with her now that she's sick, and she mentions that her ex-husband did the same thing when their daughter got sick. That night, Nicole tosses and turns, but she hears Julie arguing with another woman on the phone. When she sneaks down the hallway to eavesdrop, she ends up creaking the floorboards and she rushes back to her room when Julie immediately stops talking. The next morning, Julie apologizes for waking Nicole up, and she tells her about her dramatic friend. Julie takes Nicole to meet Patricia, and she gets her a part-time job.
Glad I could make this happen. Don't screw it up.
She loves her little jokes.
That's her joking face. Well, I can't say that's the most uncomfortable part of the film so far. When Julie gets back home, she goes into Nicole's room and sits on the bed. As she snoops through Nicole's things, she spots Nicole's prescription pills, and she goes over to the teddy bear on the shelf to rearrange it. She even goes into Nicole's bra drawer to rearrange them. Okay, the bra thing is probably one of the weirdest parts so far, but if that's the worst part of being her roommate, I deal with it. Later, Lauren shows up to meet up with Nicole, and she takes her on a tour of her little room. When they get to her room, they sit on the bed and talk about Julie, but little do they know that Julie is watching through a nanny cam on the teddy bear. After saying goodbye to Lauren, Nicole sneaks into Julie's office and snags one of the prescription scripts. Later, Nicole goes to get the rest of her things from Kyle's house, but while she's there, mixed signals get thrown around as he tells her that he knows he can be the man she deserves. She starts to let her guard down, but quickly stands her ground just as things start to get hot and heavy. When Nicole gets coffee to bring to Patricia, she notices that she's being followed. When she steps inside the shop door, the man seems to back off.
Honey! Oh no!
I take it back. She's the creepiest part. She's too peppy, and you just know that she's hiding secrets about Julie. She's that best friend that knows exactly what that role involves. After work, Patricia brings Nicole's jacket to Julie's house, and Julie invites her in for a glass of wine. Once there, Patricia mentions that Julie is younger than her daughter, Alice, would have been. As Julie feels threatened by this, she threatens to pull the plug on her, but Patricia quickly explains that she hasn't told Nicole anything about Alice. The next day, Nicole comes home with a fresh prescription that she obtained by using Julie's scripts. She tosses it in the bedside drawer and comes down to visit with Julie. After talking for a bit, Julie decides that it's a good idea to go out that night. Sure enough, the two women go to a local club and they let loose. Just as Julie seems to be enjoying her night with Nicole, Patricia and Lauren show up because Nicole invited them. As the night goes on, Lauren ends up asking Patricia just what kind of woman Julie is. Meanwhile, Julie plans to bug in Nicole's ear that Lauren thinks she's too good to be Nicole's friend. Julie even catches a glimpse of one of the boys dancing on Nicole.
Easier, lady. Stay away from Nicole, or I will pay you by your brother.
Okay, how has Julie made it this long without some sort of record or psychological evaluation? Besides that, more credit needs to be given to Patricia. Somehow, this woman has lasted as her friend for all these years. There's gotta be some sort of dirt there. The next day, Nicole wakes up and she decides to snoop in the spare bedroom that Julie said was used for storage. Once inside, she notices pictures of Julie's daughter on the wall. Sure enough, Julie pops up and scares the crap out of Nicole. After breaking down about how her relationship with her daughter grew through her sickness, Julie gives her a picture that she made for her of the two of them. Nicole heads out to meet with Kyle, and Julie goes to wait for her to come back. Just before Nicole shows up, Lauren decides to show up and question Julie about her relationship with Nicole, and Julie makes it known that she'll kill anyone that hurts Nicole. After Nicole shows up, Julie plants another bug in her ear by saying that Lauren and Kyle might be screwing each other. It seems to take hold, but Nicole tries to defend them later on. I get that Julie seeing her dead daughter in Nicole isn't healthy, but is she really doing anything harmful? Invasion of privacy is a definite yes with a nanny cam and snooping through her underwear drawer, but she is doing some good too. If it wasn't for Julie, Nicole would have been kicked out of her previous apartment within that week, and she wouldn't have had anywhere else to go. She got her a part-time job, medical expertise, and out of her bubble. Seriously, if Nicole would just lock her door when she's gone and sleeping, there wouldn't be any problems. Oh, and the bear. Nicole listens to Julie and Lauren explain how they don't trust the other one, and she defends each of them to the other. When Nicole comes home, she notices that the picture of her and Julie has been moved to her nightstand, and she aggressively tells Julie to not go in her room when she isn't there. Almost as a calm retaliation, Julie denies going into her room, and she mentions that a page is missing from her prescription pad. She can't be sure who's taking it, but she's sure one is missing. Just then, Kyle shows up to spend time with Nicole, and she takes him to her room. The two of them get frisky in the bed, and Julie watches diligently on the nanny cam. That night, Kyle mentions Nicole moving in with him, and she tries to make him understand that he hurt her when they found out that she had cancer. He apologizes for being scared before, but he swears that he's there for her no matter what now. The next day at work, the creeper man shows up, and he explains that he just wants to talk to her. He explains that his name is Benjamin, and he mentions that he needs to talk to her about his sister Alice. After hearing this, Patricia walks in and scares him away. This movie goes from 0 to 100 real quick here. We've been enjoying a slow burner thriller for an hour now, but now that Benjamin shows up, true colors pop up and we have a backstory now. Even when he goes to tell Julie that she won't get away with killing Alice, she threatens him with a pair of garden shears and essentially tells him that he'll die the same way Alice did. That's enough for me. He should have recorded that somehow. When Nicole gets home, Julie tries to do damage control, and she tells her that Benjamin was actually the one that got Alice hooked on drugs. She talks about how Alice was her previous roommate and eventually she turned to drugs again. Julie tried to set up a hospital room for her and she was helping her on her road to recovery. Then she explains the scene we saw in the beginning, and she assures Nicole that the police never found anything suspicious. After Nicole decides to take some alone time in her room, Julie goes to confront Patricia, and she makes it very known that she should watch watch her back. Nicole goes to see Lauren to get advice, but Lauren is very busy at work. Nicole tries to make her feel guilty for being too busy for her, but it doesn't work. This is definitely where Lauren seems like the most reasonable of any characters. She explains that Nicole pushed her away when she found out she had cancer. She tried to be there, but she got pushed away. Then when she tries to be around Nicole recently, Nicole blows her off to spend time with Julie instead. She can't just show up at work and expect her to drop everything just because she's having a rough time. Lauren doesn't even tell her to screw off or anything. She just asks if it can wait until after work. Reasonable enough. When Nicole gets home, Julie prepares special tea for her, and she finds out that Kyle asked her to move in with him. Julie doesn't seem too keen on this idea, but she doesn't say too much. Later, when Nicole looks for a stamp, she decides to go through Julie's desk again, and she finds that her settlement check has been sitting in Julie's desk for 3 weeks. When she goes to confront her about it, she becomes very sick and drops to the ground.
Hey! I need your help! Nurse!
It's like that same nurse has been waiting in that hallway for the next unresponsive patient. Don't let him take her. He'll slam her down on another gurney and that'll be the end of it. This dude looks like some sort of Superman too. That doctor calls out nurse and he bolts to action. He looked like he was giving some grim news to that other woman and he just dips on her to help Nicole. They take Nicole back and Julie watches through the window. Soon Dr. Frederick shows up and he's the same doctor from the beginning. When he sees what Julie is doing there, he decides that this is not his business, and he heads off to help someone else. After they get Nicole stable, Julie comes back to check on her, and Nicole thanks her for getting her in there. Nicole apologizes for going through her desk, and she admits to being the one that stole the missing prescription. After getting released from the hospital, Nicole goes to check on Kyle, and she just happens to catch Kyle and Lauren, who just got done sleeping together. After some choice words are shared, Nicole tells both of them off and leaves her key with Kyle. While this whole situation is crappy, I can oddly enough say that I can see each side of things. They're all wrong in one way or another, so there really weren't too many other ways this could have gone. Soon, Lauren shows up at Julie's door, and Julie warns her that if she ever shows up again, she'll kill her. Later, Julie goes to make things up with Patricia, but some wounds aren't easily mended. Patricia decides that she's had enough of living under Julie's thumb, and she essentially tells her that she's done being her hand-me-down friend. Holy crap! I was beginning to think that we weren't going to see any actual violence in this entire film, then Julie decided to pull that one out of nowhere. I mean, Patricia falling into that table corner is the best acting of the film by far. Julie decides that she's not going to let this ruin things with Nicole. Soon, Nicole shows up and sees Patricia's dead body on the ground. Suddenly, we cut to Julie's house and the two of them are sipping tea in the living room. Julie had made it look like Patricia had fallen from a ladder and everyone seems to believe the accident scene. Julie tries to pretend like the accident doesn't even faze her, and Nicole begins to question Julie's sanity. Later on, Nicole goes to meet with James, Julie's ex-husband. After explaining that he didn't abandon his sick daughter, he tells her that he's not actually sure of what really happened to his daughter. Back at the house, Lauren waits for Julie to leave, and she uses the spare key to sneak into the house. Once inside Nicole's room, she spots the nanny cam after leaving her a note, but what she doesn't realize is that Julie is right behind her. I can't even say I'm surprised. This woman literally just told her that she'll kill her if she shows up there again. If you're trying to get a hold of Nicole, I would try to intercept her absolutely anywhere but that house. And you definitely don't break in. No one is thinking anymore. When Nicole comes home, she finds Julie waiting for her in the dining room, and Nicole explains that it's probably best if she moves out. Suddenly, she gets a call from Dr. Frederickson. He explains that a toxicology report came back positive for arsenic. After she does a terrible job of lying, Nicole gets knocked out by Julie, and she wakes up in the spare room on a hospital bed. It's here that Julie explains that her daughter got better from the cancer, but Julie figured out that the only way she was going to be able to keep her home is if she made her sick enough to still need her. Julie tries to reassure Nicole that she'll take care of her, but Nicole frees herself from the bed and rushes to her room where she finds Lauren knocked out on the floor. As Julie gives chase, Nicole wakes up Lauren and gets ready for Julie to come inside. Then, just like that, she stabs Julie in the stomach with a letter opener. After an intense chase and struggle, Nicole knocks Julie out and she faints shortly after. Soon, Nicole wakes up in an ambulance and she sees that someone is being rolled away in a body bag. She begins to cry, but when she sees that Lauren is in the ambulance with her, she feels much better. Then, the credits roll. This isn't an original idea by any means, but at some point, it's just nice to watch such a familiar story in a different setting. That's where this movie comes in. You can tell that the cast and crew gave it their all, and for that, I can appreciate the movie. If this is something that falls in line with your type of movie, give it a shot. Thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more like this one. Comment what you think I should watch next, and I'll see you in the next video.